Last year's Hurricane Harvey caused widespread destruction and disrupted energy supplies temporarily. With this year's season starting this Friday, what will the storm season bring? Joining us now to discuss what is being done to insulate consumers from potential fuel disruptions is the American Petroleum Institute's Suzanna Lemieux. Welcome, Suzanne. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing this morning?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us, what is the industry doing to prepare for this year's hurricane season?
So the industry is very focused on providing reliable fuel supplies to our consumers across the U.S. In 2017, we saw a lot of impacts to our infrastructure in the Gulf Coast, as well as our ability to provide supplies to the state of Florida when Irma was inbound. So we've learned a lot of lessons from those storms, and we're working with our regulators to better prepare them for what we need to get our operations back online if a storm does impact operations. We're working with our personnel in our communities to exercise and drill our response plans to make sure they're ready if a storm comes and affects operations. And we're also working to look at our facilities to see what can be done to limit the potential impacts, the physical impacts of a storm, whether it be flooding, damaging winds, or storm surge. So there's a lot of activities that are going on in the industry. Certainly, we hope that the 2018 season isn't as active as the 2018 season, but we do want to be prepared. And so we're looking at what supplies are needed, what the demand looks like, and where we can bring in supplies as quickly as possible if, in fact, a storm does happen.
So in 2017, many refineries were shut down for days and the prices at the pump were affected. But that spike in prices, it didn't last too long. What was that?
So what we have today in the U.S. is the largest production of oil and natural gas in the world. And that allows us to refine and produce a lot more supplies domestically than we have in the past. And so we're able to meet demand with limited interruptions due to that level of production, but also due to the geographic diversity of our supply chain. So while 25% of refining capacity does exist in the Gulf Coast, the other 75% is distributed across the U.S., which means one geographic impact to the sector doesn't affect the whole supply chain. There's a lot of different modes of transportation, including pipelines, barges, tankers, rail cars, and trucks that can all bring in supplies to affected areas that might be non-traditional but can certainly meet consumer demand. Definitely. And so we're focused on really ensuring the resilience of that supply chain and moving supplies as quickly as possible to keep prices low and to keep consumers supplied.
So what energy policies do we need to have in place to protect consumers from price shocks at the pump when there is a storm or a world event that may change fuel supply prices, or fuel supplies rather?
Right. So the first policy that we think is the most important is continued access to domestic resources. It's our domestic production that allows us to meet increasing demand here in the U.S., regardless of events that are happening around the world. Now, that said, we are still in a global supply market. Crude oil, the price of crude oil is set internationally, and so our international relations should focus on maintaining the stability of the international community. Disruptions, tensions in the Middle East always lead to higher prices. So we want to work with our partners to make sure that, we're not exacerbating those issues. We also want to make sure that policies at the state and federal level, as far as taxes on oil and gas, remain reasonable. At the state level, those taxes can increase your price at the pump in a broad range of, across the state. Some are lower, some are higher. Maryland's right around the national average for per gallon price of gasoline right now, but changes in your state policy could increase that price. So we just want to make sure those policies are reasonable and well thought out.
Suzanna Lemieux, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be right back with more Midday Maryland right after this. Stay tuned.